Hey guys, it is Christina here from Family Health Naturally, or just Christina Mathewson. So come on, say hi, let me know where you're from, and if you've got a beverage, let me know that too. Yes, I've got wet hair. I'm trying out the curly girl method. I think I did my hair the other day and took a photo, and I was not doing anything at all. It just happened. And somebody said, oh, you should try the curly girl method. So I've had a shower and it takes forever for it to just naturally dry. So that's what's happening with my hair. Hey, Samantha. Who else can I see? Leanne, hi. Hi. Thanks for joining me, Heather. Thanks for joining me, everyone. So I won't keep you too long with the whole let's wait for everyone to show up, and I'll just get kicking into it. So first of all, I want you to know that you can put your comments and questions into the chat box. Thanks, Sam. That has just let me know that those chats are working. That's fantastic. So what I'm here to talk about today is the physical manifestation of our emotional problems. So let me backtrack by telling you who I am for those of you who don't know. My name is Christina Mathewson. I am a wife and a mother of 7 children. I'm a naturopath, I'm a herbalist, I'm a GAPS practitioner, which stands for Gut and Psychology Syndrome. Hi, Beth. And I'm also a life coach, or I like to call it an empowerment coach, because that's what I really work on with my clients, is helping them to be empowered in their life, as well as being a business coach so that I can help support other health practitioners build their businesses as well. So coaches, naturopaths, anybody in that field of helping other people, I work to help them build their businesses as well. Because for me, I think we as a collective have an awesome amount of information that we could be sharing and imparting to the world. And it's really a message that is needed so that we can change the community that we live in, the state that we live in, and the country that we live in, and eventually the ripple effect of the world. So I love to support businesses getting off the ground and actually starting to make those changes, because it's such a massive impact that we can do together. So that's pretty much me, the naturopath, the herbalist, GAPS practitioner, the coach, the mother. I'm also a homeschooler, so I have 7 children that we homeschool, and I tag team with my awesome husband. I don't do it all alone. I have a huge support from him, so massive props go out to Ben all the time for keeping down the fort. If you hear kids talking in the background, then that's a note to Ben that he needs to keep a closer eye on them. But it's life. It's a weekend. Not that it matters in my house, because every day is kind of like a weekend. So what I really want to talk about today is I want to talk about the physical manifestation of emotional problems. Now, the reason that I want to talk about this is as a health practitioner. So when I'm working as a naturopath and a herbalist, I have found that to really fully get great results for my clients, we have to look at all the areas of their environment. So that includes, the food that they're eating, the household toxins, the stress that they're living with, their emotions, and everything else that's going on in between all of those areas to help them create great results. And it's taken me probably a good 16 years to actually build all my depth of knowledge, working with a variety of different mentors, some of which are no longer with us, and some who have passed the baton on to younger practitioners, so that we can continue this journey of helping everyone. Hey, Lauren. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. So while you're listening, I want to know, do you already know that your emotions affect your physical health? Are you already in that space of thinking about how stress relates to what's happening in your body? Have you already picked up on some of the things that are going on for you? Do you already do some of the work of journaling and keeping in touch with your emotions, or, working with a coach, or connecting with really good friends and having really good, deep and meaningful conversations? Are you already doing those things, and are they already on your frame of reference? Are you already thinking about those things? So if you see me looking to the side, I'm just checking my notes, because there's some things that I definitely know that I want to be saying, and I don't want to miss them. So just quickly, who are the people that I work with as a practitioner? Well, I would call myself a general practitioner in the sense that I work with all sorts of conditions. So I'm working with eczema, I'm working with asthma, I'm working with chronic fatigue, I'm working with depression, I'm working with fertility, I'm working with all of those sorts of things. But my common theme and common thread is that there's some emotional disbalance that also needs to be taken care of. And that's where all of those different conditions for me lie together, that there's some emotional disbalance that needs to be taken care of as well. And I focus on doing some of that work with my clients. One of my favorite things is actually to hold space for my clients and let them share things that they've never shared before. And I think it's such a privilege that I get to be in that space, that I get to be that person that people share those things with. I've had clients over and over and over again say to me, I've never shared that with anyone before. I didn't even know that that was a thing. I didn't even know how much that thing was playing out in my life until I've shared it right now. So Beth saying, yeah, believe this. I think a lot of my suppressed anger is related to my weight. Absolutely. So, you know, I'm definitely not in the skinny weight range. I'm definitely have some buffer there. And me in my own personal journey, my own walk right now is actually unpacking a lot of that and a lot of the emotional connections with that, because and many of you will probably relate to this, that you may have gone to a doctor or you may have gone to a practitioner that has helped you. They've given you medication, or they've given you, you know, a service, or they've given you a dietary plan, all of those sorts of things to follow. My amazing husband just brought me a cup of tea. Go Ben. And so you may have been working with one of those people, and then, you know, you fall off the wagon. Like, you might have had the most amazing diet that works the most amazingly for you, with the most amazing exercise program, but you fall off the wagon. And then you go into this cycle of actually starting to blame yourself for not having the willpower to continue, for not having the hardness to actually keep pushing through. And what you actually then miss is that it's not the willpower that keeps you going through. It is actually unpacking why the problem created in the first place, why it developed, why it was put there in the first place. I'm loving all the props for Ben. I will let him know. Awesome husband time, cup of tea. And so what you might find is that you actually end up self-sabotaging, because the diet, and I find this with my clients all the time, is that the diet or the herbs or the other stuff that I've implemented for them actually creates results, and then all of a sudden they back away, they pull away, and they stop doing the thing. And that's where we go, well, why can't you do the thing? Because it's not that it's impossible for you to follow these things, it's that there is a subconscious autopilot planning there that says that it's not safe for you to have the thing, whether it be the weight loss, whether it be to, you know, come off thyroid medication, whether it be to be able to, you know, be able to just be healthy and happy and joyous. Like, there's something inside that says that it's not safe for you to have that thing. And that's where the work comes in. It's changing the messages that are underlying, so that you doing the dietary changes or doing whatever it is that you need to be doing or implementing into your life actually starts to feel good, and it actually is something that is easier to make an autopilot transition for. So I'm going to be talking heaps about this, but the first thing that I want to say is that I see health from a different point of view. I see our physical health, when we have actual problems with our physical health, I see that as actually a superpower. Now, that might be weird for some people to hear, that your, you know, ache and pain is a superpower. But if you listen to that ache and pain and you spend the time connecting with it, what's going on here? What needs to be addressed? What do I need to look at? If you spend time listening to what your body is trying to communicate with you, you can actually grow faster. You can develop better. You can know exactly when you're out of alignment, because some of these aches and pains and shifts and stuff come up and you experience them. And they're an opportunity for you to reconnect with your body, reconnect with your inner voice, and actually come back into alignment with who you've been designed to be and who you want to be in this world, showing up for your family, yourself, and all of the people that you connect with. So I look at health as a superpower. So then when I'm looking at a client, I'm looking at, What is this superpower trying to tell us? How is it trying to communicate with us? What information is it trying to give us so that we can lean into that? And as we lean into that, we can work with it even more and actually help shift through those conditions and those things much, much faster. And listening to our body is probably one of the big elements of actually regaining our health, because it's constantly trying to talk to us. And one of the things that I think is super amazing is that when we are babies, we are born with all of the stuff. We are born with spontaneity, we are robust, we're playful, we're emotive, we're all of those things, but we're also very in tune with our bodies. If we have a pain, we express it. We don't hide it. We don't pretend it's not there. We don't try and shovel it down. We express it. And somewhere along the way, we learn to not express that. Along with that, we also express when we're feeling hungry. So if you were a baby who was demand fed, then when you were hungry, you cried, somebody fed you, and then you stopped eating when you were full. That's usually how it worked. But then we moved to this cultural norms of starting to introduce food and these cultural norms of different meal times. And as we do that, we start to lose that connection with I'm hungry, I should eat, I'm full, I stop eating. And we lose that connection just from a very basic level of listening to our body when it wants to eat and when it doesn't want to eat. We also lose the ability of listening to our body when it says, I don't want to eat that food because it feels wrong, or it feels not nice, or it feels like there's something wrong with it. And therefore we stop also listening to the foods that our body is asking us to eat. And we sometimes will mix up the wires as well. So for example, probably most of you already know that chocolate is connected to magnesium. When we have that craving to eat chocolate, what we're really having a craving for is to bring more magnesium into our life and into our diet so that we can do all the processes that magnesium does for us. Well, that's the same with a whole bunch of different foods. So if you are one of those people that really, really craves salty chips, then that's telling us that your adrenals are probably overworked and they really are craving some minerals. And our brain connects salt with minerals because traditionally salt was packed full of minerals. If you're buying table salt, you've got one mineral in there, maybe two if it's iodized. But other than that, you're missing out on a whole heap of minerals that were available normally or traditionally in salts. And so those cravings actually give us information. And if you know how to read them, you can do the right things with them. You can respond to them. The same as with our emotional stuff. When we have emotional things going on and we feel it in our bodies and we don't express it, it is telling us that we need to express it, or that we need to experience it, or we need to have a conversation, or we need to do whatever it is that we need to do to allow that emotion to come up and out of us and not squash it, suppress it, and harbor it and hide it and do all the things that we do that we've been able to do for so long, but eventually it festers and creates a physical problem in our bodies. So for me, when I'm seeing those physical problems, I'm looking at, so here's a superpower. It's telling us that there's something wrong, and how can we bring it back into alignment so that we can do all the right things to actually help support it get into a really great place and help to get us into a really great place as well. So if any of this is resonating with you, leave me a comment, tell me hell yes, absolutely, whatever you need to. And I'm seeing some love hearts and I'm loving those as well, guys. Thanks for the support. So this quote is from Sid Garza Hillman, and I love it because it really kind of represents the point that I'm trying to make as well. Hey, Kathy. So it is, caring for the mind is as important and crucial as caring for the body. In fact, one cannot be healthy without the other. So I'm going to read that again because I think it is so important. Caring for the mind is as important and crucial as caring for the body. In fact, one cannot be healthy without the other. So you can't have a healthy body if your mind is not healthy. and you can't have a healthy mind if your body is not healthy. The two are very interrelated with each other. And so I know some people in this group will have physical chronic conditions that they're facing every single day. And thanks for the love heart explosion, guys. I love it. So there are people in the group that have chronic health conditions that they're actually faced with every day, and they will be able to tell you that it absolutely impacts their mental state, as well as their mental state impacts their physical wellness and their energy and their ability to do the things that they might be required to do to actually get healthy. Yeah, absolutely, Beth. Interesting with salt cravings and adrenal fatigue. Absolutely. That and vitamin C and a whole bunch of fat is really great for adrenal fatigue, along with unpacking why you're adrenally fatigued in the first place. I love that quote too, Kathy. So it is absolutely more than just physical health, which means that it's more than just putting the nutrients in your mouth, and it's more than just using herbs, and it's more than just detoxing your household, and it's more than just earthing, and it's more than just sunbathing, and it's more than just all the different things that you might be told on your list of things that you need to do to be healthy. It is more than that, because it is also that mental stuff as well. Like, the mental stuff has an emotional impact. So I want to give you a couple of examples, and this was from a scientific paper that I read a couple of years ago, where I was really starting to get into that that mindset of looking at the emotional problems and how that impacts our physical health. So I was reading this paper, and what they did was they did a whole bunch of different exercises or experiments where they got their participants to do a bunch of different things. So one of them was stress. So they put them in a chronic sort of stress situation. And then what they did was that they tested their blood. So they tested their blood before and they tested their blood after. And what they found was that their actual immune system lowered with stress. So their neutrophils and their other blood markers in regards to the immune system had lowered and dropped. So they were being less protective in the body when there was stress involved. When they took away the stress, they then tested again and the body recovered. But it was that moment of learning that the stress created not just feeling anxious and feeling anxiety and taking them into that flight, fright, or freeze sort of space, but actually also lowered their blood markers for their immune system. So emotional stress absolutely has a physical connection for us. Another test that I was reading about was how feeling powerlessness, when we actually feel powerlessness, what happens is actually the objects that we hold feel actually heavier. We perceive things as being heavier than if we are feeling like, normal or empowered. If we're feeling empowered, we actually feel these things lighter. So if you're feeling like, yes, you've done the Superman pose and you're like, I'm feeling empowered and I'm standing up straight and you're doing all of those things, what happens is that the objects feel lighter. But if you are feeling powerlessness and you've got that slumped over and you've got I can't do anything in the world feeling, that you're useless, that you're all of those sorts of things, then actually the objects that you're picking up are perceived as heavier. So you can imagine that if everything feels heavier, it also has this cycle of making you feel less powerless or more powerlessness in that sort of situation. Okay, so what else? Loneliness and sadness. So actually when you are feeling lonely or you're feeling sad, your core body temperature actually lowers as well. So you feel and perceive cold more readily as well. You feel chilled to your bones. All of those things are actually true. There's science behind you actually feeling lonely and sad and it making your body temperature lower as well. And if your body temperature is lowering, then it's also slowing down your metabolism, which also then, for those of us who've got slow metabolisms, working on it, you gain more weight, you feel more lethargic, you feel like you don't want to do anything. And all of that is really connected to that loneliness and sadness feeling. So what we want to do is start to unpack those things. How can we feel less loneliness? How can we feel less sadness in our lives? So along my journey in the last I'll say 16 years because that's how long I've been learning about natural health, and more so in the last 5 years about the emotional connection of our physical health to our emotional health. Yeah, it's totally all connected, Kathy. What I've learned and what I've discovered is that our emotions and our beliefs affect our biochemistry. They affect how our organs actually function, and they affect our ability to feel like we have a place, the ability to change it. Like if we're feeling really low, if you're feeling in that state of loneliness and you're feeling sadness and grief, you actually feel like you can't change it. And that's where you actually need support, because sometimes we do need a friend to come in, or we need a coach, or we need some sort of practitioner of some type to come in and help just lift us up, to help us do the thing we need to do until we are feeling greater and better and happier to be able to take over that part for ourselves. And that's what many of my fellow practitioners do. I can see some of them are on today. So we do all that sort of work along with the physical stuff too. So some of the patterns that I have noticed, and I did talk about it a little bit at the start, is what I have noticed with a whole bunch of clients that come in is that part of their journey is that they are feeling unwell. So they go to the doctor. They might be having depression, or they might be experiencing anxiety, or they might be experiencing fatigue, for example. So they go to the doctor. The doctor gives them a diagnosis, and again, it might be they got a diagnosis of chronic fatigue or adrenal fatigue, not so much with the doctor, but from another naturopath, etc. And then the practitioner or the doctor gives them some medication. They give them a plan. They go do the blood test. They do all the things, and that might be working. Or if that doesn't work, they then go and seek out another practitioner. And again, that might then be working after the practitioner's given them herbs, supplements, all the things, meal plans, etc. And then the client goes home, they start doing all the things that they know that they need to be doing, or they've been told, and they're going really great and they're doing fantastic. And then all of a sudden they hit the wall. All of a sudden they just stop doing some of those things, and they struggle to get back on the wagon. And that is a cycle that I see happening all the time. Now, the reason that cycle happens is because one of the major drivers of the condition in the first place was not addressed. And a lot of those practitioners are not addressing the emotional reason that problem was created in the first place. Because our bodies are trying to communicate with us all of the time. It's trying to give us subtle messages. It's trying to give us simple messages. But if we're not listening to it, eventually it has to talk louder and louder and louder. And when you're in a chronic condition, or you've reached the point that you've created an autoimmune condition, your body is literally screaming at you, please listen to me. I don't want to feel like this anymore. You don't need to feel like this anymore. Help me do something about it. Like, it's literally screaming at you when you're in that state. And I just touched a little bit on then an autoimmune condition. So the definition of an autoimmune condition is self-attacking self. So from the immune system point of view, it is the immune system attacking parts of the body. So if you've got Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid condition, it is the immune system attacking the thyroid. But essentially, if you boil it down, it's self-attacking self. So whenever I'm working with a client that has an autoimmune condition, we have to and we must always work on why they're attacking themselves. And that can be for a whole range of different reasons, because everybody has their own story, their own map, all those different things. They've got their own experiences that have led them on that journey of attacking themselves and saying all the vile things to themselves that have created that condition in the first place. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit about is one of those core drivers, and was what we call the meta programming. So our meta programming is essentially how we think and feel about the world, or how we perceive the world. It is all of that stuff. The way I'm going to explain it is, do you remember learning to drive a car? Like, I remember when I first learned to drive a car. It was a very overloading situation the first time that I got in the car, because like there's a clutch, there's a brake, there's like gas, there's a handbrake, there's a steering wheel, there's like all these things, and then there's other cars Like, it's a very overwhelming sort of space when you're first learning to drive a car, if you've not been experiencing it before. And so I remember that experience of it being, oh my gosh, totally having to think about the whole thing. But eventually, once you've done it enough, it moves into autopilot, which then becomes part of our meta programming. It's our autopilot mode. So now I can drive places, and I'm sure you guys who have been driving for a significant amount of time will have experienced this too, where you drive somewhere and then you might think back and go, I'm pretty sure I didn't go through any red lights. I know I didn't hit anybody. I don't know if I used all my indicators at the right times. I don't really know how I got here. Like, I know I got here and I'm pretty sure I did all the right things to get here, but I actually don't have a really strong memory recall of all the different things that I've done on the way there. And that's because we've put driving in our meta programming. We've put it on our autopilot. And so when we're trying to do some of the work on the emotional conditions, what we're really looking at is, what are the meta programs that we've actually downloaded and we've put into place? And those meta programs make up beliefs, they make up values, they do all of those sorts of things. So if you're listening to this going, what's going on in my meta programming, or what's going on in my subconscious belief system? So when I'm working with clients and we have this emotional stuff going on, that's what I'm looking for. I'm listening for the meta programming that they have. I'm listening for the belief systems that they have, the rules that they've created around how they're allowed to live in the world, how they're allowed to function in the world. I'm listening to find out and discover those things so that we can essentially then change them. We can proactively put in a new record. We can recognize them for what they are. We can decipher them, we can change them, we can do all the things and put in a new program that we want to be playing, instead of the auto program that is there, that is constantly keeping us in that self-sabotaging space. So, how are you feeling about the meta programming and the autopilot? Are you getting it? Are you following me? Give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you're understanding, you're on track, you're getting it, all those sorts of things. Okay, so when it comes to our meta programming and when it comes to our subconscious belief system, one of the major problems is that we actually create those while we're still really young. So from the moment we're born, some may even say that we're doing it even before we're born, while we're in utero. And then the moment we're born, we learn how to interact in our lives based on what we see mirrored back at us. So for example, if you were a baby and you were ignored when you cried, you would eventually learn not to cry because nobody's listening. If you were a baby and you learnt that these were the times that you have to sleep, then you would eventually learn that those are the times that you have to sleep because somebody would have probably ignored you or done some sleep training with you or whatever. Essentially, it's the sleep training, that training element that conditions us to how we are to behave in the world that we're actually experiencing. So then from babyhood, we move into toddlerhood, we start to get the feedback that some of our actions are not appropriate. Let's say you're running through the house, your mum might be yelling at you, don't run through the house. That's some feedback that you shouldn't run through the house. Now you can take that on board, or you might not have taken it on board, as some of my children I'm sure have not taken on board, but we all have different experiences or different ways that our parents conditioned us, and our grandparents and our extended family and our school has conditioned us to how we think, behave, and what is socially appropriate and what is not socially appropriate. But these are created while we're still really, really young. And by around 7, those beliefs and those patterns and those meta programs are locked in almost. And I'm going to say almost because you can absolutely change them. You just need to discover what they are first. Once you discover them, you can change them and you can do something about them. But it is those first 7 years that we actually are not thinking on a critical level. Like, we just don't have the brain capacity at that point to be critical thinkers. We can't go, oh, this was said, it means this, and it's not a bad thing about me. Like, a perfect example of this is children have this unique ability to absolutely turn all the negative stuff into a reason that it's their fault, that it's their problem, that they made the mistake. So for example, when I'm working with money blocks, one of the ones that often comes up is this: if I didn't need so much, we wouldn't be in financial trouble. Like, kids have internalized two parents talking about not having enough money or not being able to buy the thing that they want to have, or having a bit of a domestic sort of confrontation around money, and the children then perceive that and can perceive that as, if I didn't eat so much, or if I didn't do this, or if I didn't need so many clothes, or if I didn't do these things, then we wouldn't have this problem and it's all my fault. Like, kids have that magic ability to be able to turn everything into their own fault and their own, like, they are to blame for all the things that are happening in the world. And so that is part of the problem with this meta programming, is that they learn it and they lock it in while they're still in that stage of not critically thinking, where they're not yet able to go, oh, she's yelling, but is it actually about me, or is it really about her? Whereas an adult can do that. Adult has that ability to start to critical think and start to look at things from a more objective point of view, so that they can question, is this really about me, or is this not about me? Is it their stuff? Is this feedback really for me? All of that sort of stuff. And so when I'm again working with clients, a lot of the things that we start to tackle into and press into is that stuff that happened, in the first 7-8 years of life, or sometimes after that. But we're looking at the meta programming that took place in those first 7 or so years, and then what developed out of that. Let me know you're following along. Give me a thumbs up. Hoping you're starting to see it. I'm going to give you some examples. So if you're not yet seeing it, as we move forward, I'm going to give you some examples as well. So there's sort of 6 major cycles that we go through as, going from child, baby, all the way through to adulthood, and how we live our lives. So of course, when you are born, and if any of you who are mums, you'll know, when your baby is born, it's like they have this clean slate, this magical space where, you look at them and they're so worthy, they're so lovable, they're so amazing. Their tiny fingers and their hands and toes are also fantastic. They cry, they giggle, everything about them is really, really magical. Like, they're joyful, they're spontaneous, they are risk takers. Like, they're totally happy to crawl and fall and crawl and fall and learn the skill of actually doing it, because they want to learn to crawl. And then they learn to walk, and, they fall down, but they get themselves back up, and they learn different ways of doing it. And they're really, really excited about doing all those things. They're not afraid of failure. They're not afraid of risking themselves. And they're really, they're exploring, they're adventurous. They're all of those amazing qualities. They're lovable. They're all of that sort of stuff. I'm going to come back to that question, Kathy, because it's a really good one. But then what happens, as they start to move through this cycle of being amazing and all the things, the world starts to kind of come in. Hey, Puva. So the world comes in and starts to condition them. Grandparents come in, parents come in, teachers come in, aunts and uncles come in, other families come in, and they start to condition them around what is appropriate and what is not appropriate, and how they're meant to behave and what they're meant to behave and how they're meant to express themselves. And that then causes a self-denial, a space where they start to deny parts of themselves. So for me, one of my things was, like, I used to dance everywhere. Like, you pretty much needed to staple my feet to the floor for me not to dance, because I loved dancing, I loved moving, I loved singing, I loved music, I loved all of those sorts of things, and it was just coming out of me. But the people around me didn't necessarily enjoy me dancing and singing and being like super duper happy with my life at that point in time. And so they therefore would say things like, you're being annoying, I want you to stop that, would you just shut up? All of those sorts of things, until eventually I shut those parts down. I stopped doing the dancing, and I stopped doing the singing, and I stopped expressing myself in that way, and I became more sedentary and just sat down, and I, did the thing and conditioned myself in that way to stop expressing myself. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that kind of story. It might be something different. It might not be singing and dancing. It might be something else that you have done, that you have shut down and stopped expressing. And then we go through this phase of growing up, where The people around us were the people that conditioned us, and now we become the conditioner. So we become the person that keeps ourselves stuck in that space. For me, not dancing, not singing. We become the person that brings in the shame about, showing who we are, or, one of my really great friends loves to dress in really bright colors, but there are heaps of people that give her a lot of flack for that, or look really, oh, you can't dress like that. That's disgusting. That's gross. All of those sorts of things. She could take that information and go, oh, everybody else hates this. I'm not going to do it. Or I don't care. I love this. I'm going to be me. Many of us do the other thing, where we take the information or the feedback from those around us and we use it to shame and suppress ourselves and keep ourselves and our true kind of loves, passions, and identities hidden and away from the rest of the world, because we might get ridiculed for it, we might get called out for it, all of those sorts of things, and we become our self-oppressor. So the outside people have conditioned us to start with as kids, then we take on that role and we do the self-suppression. We suppress ourselves. Then as we continue through life, what we do is we start to live a safe life. So we are looking at problems that are safe as opposed to things that are risky. So for example, you probably have heard, when it comes to relationships, that the argument isn't like the topic of the argument is never the topic of the argument. Like the argument is actually mostly about all of these other things, like our beliefs and our understandings and our, context and all the things. Like the argument that's actually happening is not often actually around the topic. So for example, a lot of people will argue around money. Money is one of those things that people argue about a lot. But the argument itself is not necessarily about money. It's about the perception of what that money is. It's about the beliefs that are in there. All of the other things, like it could be, let's say, this is one that comes up for some of my clients, that their husband is upset that they're spending money on working on their health and working on fixing their health and getting themselves into a healthy condition. They're angry about all the money that they're spending on that sort of stuff. Really, what they're angry about is that the other party is loving themselves enough to do the care that they need and what is required to get them healthy. And the internal messaging is, I'm not enough, so why can you be enough? That becomes what the actual argument is about. The argument is really about the person, again, who's saying you can't spend that money on that thing, believing that they're not enough to be able to spend that money on, that they're not worthy, that they're not lovable, that they're not enough. And that is just the physical sort of representation of the argument, when the argument is really deeper. But they're keeping it in a safe space where we're talking about money. Money is the problem. We're looking at that safe problem, and we're not looking at the risky problem, which is, sorry, I've got a kid waving at me.
I like my shepherd's pie.
Okay, great. Go and enjoy your shepherd's pie. Joy, joy, joy. So the argument itself is like they're keeping it in that space of money. Money is the topic that we're arguing about, which is safe, as opposed to looking at the risky problem. And the risky problem is not believing that they're enough, that they're worthy, and that they're lovable. They don't believe those things. And if they look at those things, then they enter into this space of vulnerability. And that's a really scary place for a whole bunch of people, that being vulnerable is really, really scary. And so instead of being vulnerable, instead of opening up about the real problem, the real drivers, the real things, I'm going to keep it in that safe space where it's easy for me to talk about money and yell about money, because that's not looking at me. It's kind of the switcheroo sort of situation where it's look over here, but don't see the real thing that's happening behind here. And so part of my job when I'm working with my clients on this emotional sort of playing field is actually to say, oh, yep, that's your safe problem. Let's go over here and look at that risky problem, so that we can start addressing that. So we can start looking at why you've created the patterns that you've created that keep you stuck, why you've got those beliefs there, changing those beliefs, changing the meta programming so that we can switch it out for something that actually does serve you, that actually is working for you. So I hope you're following along. Let me know if you're not. I'm happy to answer any more questions and talk about it a little bit more. But how does this Yeah, it's totally about deflection as well, Julie. Totally about deflection. So how does this relate to our health? Like we're talking a whole bunch around the physical sort of those emotional things. How does that actually relate to our health? So it relates in a whole bunch of different ways. One of which is that for many of us, we have learned that we have to put on masks, that we have to wear or play different roles in our lives to be acceptable, to be loved by those around us, or what we perceive to be love around us. We have to wear these certain masks, we have to play certain roles, and we have to do certain things and confine ourselves to those roles, masks, etc., that we have learnt to live along the way. And so when I'm working with my clients, one of the things that we have to do is actually to start identifying our masks, start looking at them, start taking them down, start seeing what else is available to us to be able to use, and actually reconnect to those parts of ourselves that have been shut down. Now, this is the number one thing that I see with any of my clients that have anxiety or have depression. It's that they've learned somewhere in their life that it's not okay to be them, that they have to suppress themselves, that they have to shut down who they are in order to be accepted by those around them. So that is part of our journey, is like reconnecting with that person, reconnecting with that little girl who was told that it was not okay for her to spin around in her fancy dresses. Like it was not okay to be joyous. It was not okay to be loud, every so often. It's not okay to do those things, and reconnect with that little person that has been told that they're not okay, and start to tell them that they are okay. Start to bring them out, start to actually bring them into the now and the present, start to experience and walk them out and reconnect with them. That's part of the healing journey. So I'm going to give you some examples of how I've seen this play out in a number of my clients. So it was probably about 4 years ago now that I was working with this particular client, and she had 2 autoimmune conditions. And so, there was a whole heap of immune stuff going on for her. And with those 2 autoimmune conditions, there was lots and lots of stuff that she needed to do. So I created a plan for her, created all the foods and all the things that she needed to do. And she would go away, she would do the thing, and she would report back to me, man, I'm feeling great. I've got awesome energy. I'm feeling good. I can feel myself getting better. I've done things today that I haven't been able to do in like months or years. I'm feeling really great. And then the next check-in would be like, I'm not feeling so great. I know that I need to do this thing, but I'm really struggling to do it. And there's all these excuses and all these stories that stopped her from doing what she needed to do that was making her feel really great in the first place. And as we started to dig deep and started to unpack and like work out what was really going on, what we discovered from an emotional point of view was that as a little girl, her mother had breast cancer. And not once, but she had it twice. And so from her perception as a little girl, what she witnessed growing up was that a healthy, happy marriage is a husband caring for a wife. Caring for a sick wife specifically. So that's what she saw as a healthy, happy marriage growing up. That was her identifying markers of what made a healthy, happy marriage. And she had subconsciously connected that to have a healthy marriage, I have to be sick so that my husband can care for me. And again, we're looking at the mother had 2 bouts of breast cancer. She had 2 different autoimmune conditions. And so one of her top values in her life was marriage and family. So with the belief system that she currently had that a healthy, happy marriage is a husband caring for a sick wife, and she has marriage and family as her top core value, she wasn't able to get better, because as soon as she got better, she was challenging her belief around what made a healthy, happy marriage. But she wasn't aware of that. She wasn't aware that she'd created that belief. So for her to get better, there was 2 ways that she could get better. And one was to leave her husband, because then she didn't have a husband that she needed to be sick for, which she wasn't going to do because she had a healthy, happy marriage, because marriage was one of her top values. And so she wasn't going to do that. Not that I recommended that she did do that. But the other way is to actually confront the belief, change the belief Is that actually the truth? Redefine what a healthy, happy marriage is so that you don't have to be sick to be in one. Does that make sense? I hope so. Yeah, Sam's saying, with health issues related to my mum being sick my whole life. Absolutely. You know, I see that all the time. I see it all the time where kids have grown up with a parent who has had a chronic condition, and they have then learnt this internal belief that they're not allowed to be healthy, that they're like, there's something wrong with them if they're healthy, or that if they are healthy, that it's somehow being hurtful or mean to their parent. So it's not an uncommon thing for parents of children who have a chronic illness to believe that they have to be sick as well, and so they do things that actually keep them feeling sick. Yeah, Sam's saying, I felt guilty, mum was sick. Absolutely, and it's completely understandable how that develops, because I see it over and over and over again. So chronic fatigue, I'm going to share a little bit about chronic fatigue. So often when I'm working with a client that has chronic fatigue, somewhere in their life, they again have had to learn that they need to play a particular role to be acceptable to the people around them. And so they've taken on this role, and they play this role to the point of actually suppressing so much of themselves that it is physically draining for them. Their physical self is emotionally drained because they're constantly acting or playing a character. Like if you were, like I have a Bachelor of Performing Arts, and I remember when I was doing performing arts, we'd do plays in short periods of time. Like we wouldn't do a play for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks on end. We would have short periods of time. There would be rest breaks in between, and you would do a play for maybe maximum 3 hours at a time. Like you really weren't doing it for days and days and days on end that never ended. Like you would have breaks in between. But if you imagined that you had to play a character every waking moment, it would be exhausting. And no wonder they have chronic fatigue when they're constantly thinking about who they have to be safe in the world. And so again, when I'm unpacking someone with chronic fatigue, I'm looking at all of the physical drivers, but I'm also looking at all of the emotional, spiritual drivers as to why they're not allowed to be themselves, why they've created the character that they're playing, and how can we get them back into their own bodies? How can we get them back into taking on their own, loves, likes, and so on, and exploring who they are, to be able to have the energy that they want to be having. Absolutely, Julie. Mentally exhausted. Absolutely. Yeah, and Julie's saying that I've been sick for so long, it's now the norm. And that's so much the case. Like I work with some chronic eczema clients, and saying to them, what would life be like if you didn't have eczema? Because their whole life they've had it, and then all of a sudden I'm saying, well, let's see if we can fix this, and what would life be like without it? They don't know what that looks like, and so therefore they struggle to walk that out on a consistent basis, because they don't know what it looks like yet. And so part of my job is helping them to dream build, help them to reconnect with that person, or connect with a future part of themselves that doesn't have that chronic condition, that doesn't have the eczema in this case, whatever it is, helping them to connect with that person. So again, depression. When I'm working with depression, again, I'm looking for places where people have been told it's not okay to be themselves. I'm looking for spaces where they've shut down passions in themselves. They've shut down parts of themselves that are passionately crying to come out, or they've been through some massive trauma that has required them to hide. So those are the two types of things that I'm looking at when I'm looking at someone with depression. Where have they been shut down? Where is the trauma that is requiring them to hide to stay safe? So that we can start moving in the direction that allows them to breathe passion back into their life, breathe joy and happiness back into their life. And that also then changes their physical markers, their biochemistry. It all changes when you can start to change those things, because our mind is an extremely powerful tool. So another one, a quick one, cancer. Well, not cancer, I'm going to talk about bowels. Let's talk about that. So anyone who's got constipation, for an extended period of time. I'm not just saying your normal bowel movements, and then tomorrow you have a weird one because you ate weird food or whatever. I'm talking about somebody who's got chronic constipation. Then I'm usually looking at somebody who is holding on to old crap. Like they're holding on to old baggage, and I want to say they're holding on to old shit. Like they really need to learn to let go of their old stuff because they're holding on to it. Like it's a physical manifestation of that emotional problem of holding on to stuff. And that's where we work through. We go, do you really want to hold on to this thing? Do you want it to be continuing to poison your body? Do you want it to be continuing to circulate and recirculate through your body? Or can we start to let go of it because the person that you're angry at or the thing that you're angry at is no longer present? It's gone. That person's not even thinking about it. It is still present for you though. Yeah, you have the opposite, letting everything go. Not holding on to enough stuff maybe, Julie. But it's a more complicated situation for you, Julie. Okay, asthmatics. So when somebody has some lung conditions like bronchitis, asthma, pneumonia, all of those things, when they've got them in a chronic state, then I'm looking at somebody that's probably holding on to a lot of grief, that they're still holding on to hurts, pains, and grief. And it's almost like they can't breathe because of how much the emotional stuff is impacting them. And so that's where I see, that's where I start looking. If I'm looking at a lung condition, I'm looking at what are you holding on to? Why can't you breathe? Like, is there a lot of judgment? Sometimes that's happened where I'm working with an asthma patient and they've grown up with so much judgment. Like their parents have been very judgmental people that they've had to achieve, that they're walking on eggshells, all of those sorts of things. And it's like they can't breathe because they're holding on to all their stuff. And that's part of our job is fixing and supporting the lungs, but also supporting that. Let's breathe. Like let's do some things that allow you to breathe and bring breath into your life again and let go of some of the pain and the trauma that you've been experiencing. Make sense? I'm going to tell you about this client. So this client was one of my really early on clients when it came to me starting to connect the emotional and the physical stuff. Would this be kids as well? So when it comes to kids, it's either the kid or it is the parent, which is quite often the case. So if they're really young kids, you're often looking at the problem in the parents. Like they are, the child is a manifestation of what the parent is going through or experiencing. So you can often see this translation of what's happening for the parent is actually the physical representation of being physically represented in the actual child. So that's how it works with kids, Kathy. So this particular client, so they're taking on the adults' issues, absolutely. So this particular client that I want to share about, she came in to see me and she was having migraines. And specifically, she was having migraines when she had an orgasm. So when she was with a partner and she reached orgasm, she would get a migraine. And she would have a migraine that would last for several days. And as we started to unpack that, I'm looking at the physical stuff and I'm going, okay, so she's got, her detox pathways are blocked. The ability to break down estrogen is probably not working as well as it should. She's not drinking enough water. There's stagnation, the energy or just the biochemistry of her body is not moving as it should and therefore also creates a headache. But then as I start to dig it a little bit deeper, she gets to this moment and she starts to share. And she shares that she was in a domestic violence situation where her husband would beat her quite regularly. And she got to the point where she built her strength up to the point to leave him. They had 3 children and she was leaving him. And they were in a different country. So they were living in the country together and the only way to get away was to flee. But as she was fleeing, the husband grabbed the son and she couldn't get him. She couldn't get back to get him. She couldn't get him. And she had been carrying this grief and this trauma and this guilt around leaving her son with this abusive guy and not having the power to go back and help him, not have the power to get him and all of those sorts of things because she'd also left the country. That's how she had to escape. And she'd been carrying this guilt and this shame and this burden with her for so long that when she met somebody else that she wanted to interact with, the moment she started actually experiencing, that physical joy and experience of having an orgasm, it manifested in a migraine. This pain, this hurt, this, like a punishment that she was experiencing something good. And so you can see again that there's this physical manifestation of this emotional problem and the guilt and the shame that she'd been carrying. Now, I could do all the work on actually clearing her detox pathways, helping her release the excess energy, estrogen, helping her to drink more water, do all those sorts of things. But that was never going to fix the guilt and the shame that she'd been carrying all these years. And the guilt and the shame was ultimately the fundamental reason, or the plug in the boat, that was keeping her stuck in this cycle of, if I experience something good, then I have to feel guilt and shame and pain. So again, I hope you're kind of starting to see how the emotional stuff manifests into our physical being. It happens with fertility clients. You know, I've had a fertility client as well where they were trying to conceive for a good 5 years. Like, they'd done all of the different things. They'd, you know, done IVF. They did all of the doctor's things. They'd done a whole heap of natural things as well. And they finally came to see me, and I was, you know, looking through all the stuff, and they had one of those cases where there's no reason, no identifiable reason as to why they couldn't conceive. And so I'm doing the herbs just to make sure that we've got like the herbs and, you know, the hormones are all working the way that we need them to work for her to conceive, and, you know, checking the thyroid and doing all that sort of stuff that I normally would. And then I get to the point in the conversation where I go, so let's start talking about the emotional stuff. Like, let's start talking about what's happening on an emotional level. Talk me through when you decided that you were going to have children and how that all worked. And what we found was that when they decided, they just got together and they're like, okay, I'm feeling ready to have children. He's feeling ready to have children. Let's decide to you know, get rid of the birth control and all of that sort of stuff. And let's decide to actually actively try and pursue having children. And so that happened within 2 days of 9/11 taking place. And once 9/11 took place, she had internalized that this was not a safe well to have a baby, that the planet was unsafe, that the culture was unsafe, that we're at risk, we're at war, all of these horrible things are taking place. This is not a safe place to bring up children. It's not a safe place to have a baby. And what did her body do? It just did what she'd asked it to do. It just did what she said. It's not a safe place to have a baby, so don't get pregnant. So it did that. It didn't get pregnant. It stopped the cycle working properly. Stopped, you know, things working the way that they should have worked because of this internal messaging that she'd given herself. So we did a session of starting to clear that and starting to change that, bringing up the beliefs, changing the beliefs, doing all the things that I would normally do, changing that meta programming that was taking place. And then within 3 months, she had conceived naturally. You know, we stopped all the herbs and things like that, but she conceived naturally within 3 months of actually doing the emotional work of that. Because once she moved the plug, it was easy for her to get pregnant because there was no physical reason why she couldn't get pregnant. It was just a manifestation of that internal messaging that was taking place. So, how are you going? Are you liking this? Are you loving this? Let me know. Like, is it resonating for you? Is it hitting some strings? Are you starting to see things in a slightly different way? Are you starting to look at how some of your emotional states have contributed to that physical manifestation that you might be going through? Do you have friends that you're seeing that this could be applying to? I hope you're starting to see the link. So I'm going to give you a really basic equals. So when I'm seeing these types of conditions, this is where I start to look. Now, it's not always the same because it's often different for different people, or it manifests in slightly different ways. But this is just a little proviso example. So if you've got a pen and paper and you want to write it down, totally do that. But the first one is bones. When I'm seeing a problem with bones, so it could be arthritis, it could be they're breaking bones all the time, it could be brittle bones, it could be anything in that shape or way about when it comes to bones. So when I'm looking at someone who's got a problem with their skeletal system, then I'm looking at somebody that's probably holding on to a lot of resentment. Yeah, absolutely. Kathy's saying it's amazing how much of an effect our mind has on the body, and scary how much we disregard the link. And I'm absolutely with you there. Absolutely. So again, bones often represent resentment. So if somebody's having some problems, osteoporosis, for example, where bone density is starting to decrease, they've often got some resentment that needs to be addressed and needs to be talked about. Ligaments, so that's the joints. You know, if you've got tennis elbow, your Achilles heel, all of those sorts of things. When I'm looking at ligaments, I'm often looking at a problem with control. Either they need control or they have no control. But there is a problem or a discussion that needs to take place around control. So that's the area that I'm looking at. I'm looking for, where is the control in their life? Where do they feel out of control? All of those sorts of things. I'm looking at control. So ligaments equal control. If somebody wants to write these in, you totally can, so everyone can have them. Otherwise, make a note for yourself. Muscles. So when somebody has muscular sort of problems, like they might have a stiff neck all the time, or they might have, some sort of body part that is constantly sore, or muscular sore, not just like the joint sore, but the muscular sore. If I'm looking at someone with a muscular soreness, what I'm looking at, or muscular problems, is guilt. That there is some guilt that needs to be addressed. There's some often shame in there as well that's kind of all mixed in, and we have to start talking about that, and we have to start bringing that up and addressing it so that we can do something about it and change or address any of the emotions that have been kept suppressed from guilt. So nerves. So when somebody has nerve issues, so it can be nervous system, it can be like lack of sleep, because that's connected to the nervous system. It could be another Tourette's. Tourette's is a perfect one. Like, the nervous system is not working the way that it should, and it's making stuff to just spontaneously happen. Tingling hands, those sorts of things. When I'm looking at those, I'm looking at an unbalanced communication, so that the person is often feeling unheard, or that when they say words that they're not being interpreted in the right way. So nerves equal unbalanced communication. So one side might be talking more than the other side, so they might be talked at a lot, or they might be talking a lot at other people. Yeah, so think about that one then, Sam. Have a think about that one. Yeah, Julie, I'm happy to touch base with you, and I do know that there was a message that I needed to reply to, and I keep forgetting to reply to it. So skin. So anyone who has like skin type of issues, so rashes, eczema, psoriasis, dermatitis, dandruff, all of those sorts of things, if they've got some skin conditions, especially when they're chronic, what we're looking at is they feel unworthy, they've got boundary issues, and they're holding on to feelings, like they're holding their feelings in and not expressing them, or they've got boundary issues, so people are constantly stepping over their boundary issues because they're not holding up their boundaries, and also they feel really unworthy. Yeah, scaly legs as well. Yeah. So tendons, so anyone who's got tendinitis and those sorts of things, when there's tendons, then often they have a lack of flexibility in their life. So they, perhaps struggle when things change. When something spontaneous takes place, they might often struggle with that. And so we'll be looking at those sorts of things and stretching them a little bit and helping them look at where they've developed this inflexibility from, and what sort of cycles have taken place for them to believe that they're not allowed to be flexible, and all of that sort of stuff. That's kind of where I start talking to them about those sorts of conditions and issues and see what comes out. It's amazing when you start talking with people about this sort of stuff and you connect it for them, that the stories and the stuff that comes out is phenomenal. So gut health. When somebody has a really unbalanced gut, so I'm looking at things like, again, diarrhea, constipation. I'm looking at irritable bowel syndrome. I'm looking at Crohn's. I'm looking at diverticulitis. I'm looking at just chronic feeling nausea. I'm looking at all of those sorts of things. And what I'm actually then looking at is also somebody who could be struggling with their personal power. So feeling like they don't actually have power over their own selves, that they've lost their personal power, that they've lost their ability to stand up for themselves, or they're not allowed to stand up for themselves, or all of those sorts of things. Like I really start to push in and press in to where they're sitting with their personal power and how they're feeling about their own personal power. Liver. So when I'm looking at somebody who's got some liver stuff, like they might have gone to the doctor and the doctor has told them that they've got fatty liver, or I'm looking at them from a systematic point of view and I can see that their liver is not functioning the way that it should be. It's not detoxifying as much as it should or it could. Then I'm looking at somebody who's probably holding on to anger and resentment, frustration, bitterness, those sorts of things. And the term that comes to mind is flying off the handle. So when I'm working with a lot of my GAPS clients, what happens is part of our GAPS program is actually to do a lot of detoxing. So the first part of it is like the body is detoxing over and over and over again. So much detoxing going on. And I'll often get messages from clients saying, I'm so angry. Like there's all this anger. I'm so pissed off with the whole world right now. Like I'm angry about everything. And essentially what's actually happening for them is that because we've started to move the liver, the emotion that has been harbored in the liver is wanting to move as well. And it's probably coming out really unresourcefully. So it's spilling out all over their family, but it is emotions that have been trapped inside their body that have needed to be dealt with for a really long time. And they have been squashing them down, suppressing them down, and that then blocks the liver from working. But once we get that liver working properly, it feels like it's all coming out and it's coming out over everyone. Yeah, I'm glad that makes sense for you, Julie. Totally makes sense for me. So again, I touched on lungs, talking about grief and suppression, like not having the power to do what they want to do or feeling like they're walking on eggshells, or there's this overwhelming grief that they just can't breathe, like they can't breathe. So kidneys, when I'm looking at kidney problems, I'm often looking at fears and insecurities and isolation. Those are the sorts of things that go along with some of the kidney problems. You know, where are you feeling fear? What are you afraid of? How are you feeling isolated? All of those sorts of things. I'm looking at those and I'm tapping into those, and we're, you know, looking for, examples within their life where they've learnt the meta programming that has kept that condition going. Spleen. So if somebody has a spleen issue, and that could be to do with their immune system is not working as well as it should be or could be. Their spleen is not doing all of those things. Then when I'm looking at things like worry, and we might be focusing on some particular topics around worry and dwelling on worries, and like excessive work mentality is one of the ones that comes up for the spleen. Like if I have to work because that's how they prove that they're lovable, is by producing or working and so on, then that impacts the spleen and their immune system. So heart equals a lack of enthusiasm and vitality. So somewhere along their life, they have been probably suppressed or told that their dreams or desires can't happen, or they're not worthy of them, or that's only for this type of person and you're not that type of person. So that's often what happens when it comes to the heart. It can also be a loss, like they've lost somebody that they're really loving and grieving for, but then that's usually connected. They usually have both heart and lungs if that's the case. But when it's just heart, like there might be high cholesterol, or there might be cardiorhythmia, or there might be, they might have some sort of other cardio sort of issue. It's where their fire has been, like somebody's just chucked a bucket of water on their fire and told them that their dreams are not worthy, not available, they can't have them, those sorts of things. So that's just a brief rundown of that, and what I'm looking for when I'm working with clients and I'm looking at those emotional issues. There's a whole heap more that we can talk about and do with it, but the first element is always to start to identify, start to look at what is my body trying to tell me. And if you ask your body questions, if you ask yourself questions, and I mean good quality questions, it will respond. So for example, if you're in that state of you want to lose more weight, then the questions that you want to ask yourself is, what is my body really needing? Yeah, anxiety would be for spleen too as well, Kathy. What is my body really needing right now? Because your brain and your subconscious has access to all of your biochemistry. It knows exactly what's happening on a biochemical level all of the time. I can do a blood test in the morning and I can do a blood test in the evening, and both those blood tests would be different. We would not get the exact same numbers from a morning result and an evening result. Like even within 2 hours, the biochemistry of your body changes, and your body knows that. It has receptors that pick up all of that information. And if you ask it and you reconnect with it, it will provide you with the answers. So what would feel good for me to have now? What do I need now? Sometimes you need some interpretation, just like I mentioned the chocolate and the magnesium at the beginning, or the salty chips and your adrenals. Like sometimes you need to interpret that in a healthy way, but start by listening to what it's actually asking for, and it will tell you if you ask it good quality questions. Like, don't ask the question of why am I so fat, because it will answer with all the schoolyard bully answers like, because you're an idiot, because you're dumb, because you're blah, 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 because of this. But instead of asking why am I so fat, you would ask, how can I feel healthy? What can I do, or what do I need to feel healthy? And it will actually start sifting through all of the information that is available to it and answer that question. It will start looking at that. It will make food that is good for you in that particular moment look better and more appealing. You will be drawn to it. You will want to eat and consume that. You might want to not eat and consume. It might be like, no, we just need water. And so you might then be attracted to drinking more water. Like if you ask the questions, it can give you the information, but just remember that sometimes you need to translate and interpret that information. And that's, again, where my fellow practitioners and myself can come in and help you with that sort of stuff. But then you need to do the healing work, and the healing work of tapping into what is the emotional condition or state or problem that is taking place and keeping this happening. What is the belief that has kept me in this space? And asking those questions so that you can start addressing them, identifying and healing the problem to start with. Going back and loving that little person that was suppressed, bringing them into the future and starting to express how they feel and manifest that in your physical life now. And if you're loving this, you're totally welcome to come and do more of this work with me, because it's the thing that makes me shine, because I love doing this. But I want to leave you with a little exercise. So if you're listening along and you've got the opportunity, you're not driving a car, close your eyes and do this activity with me. So I want you to close your eyes, take a big deep breath, and I want you to bring your attention to a moment in your life where you were feeling immense joy, where you were so, so happy. Like it could be the birth of a baby, it could have been when you got married, it could have been the first date with your partner, it could have been anything that brings you joy. Like it could be watching one of your kids up on stage, but bring your attention to a moment that brings you great joy. And just start to picture that in your mind's eye. Start to think about it, start to look at it, remember it, bring some awareness to how it feels in your body, what it feels like in your body. And just breathe that in, feeling that joy that you feel when you're in that moment. Now, I want you to imagine that to your right is a big dial, just like on a radio. And you grab that dial and you start to turn the dial up. So that as you turn the dial up, you feel more joy. You feel more happiness. You feel more love and compassion. You feel more of that experience that you're experiencing. And then continue to turn that up even louder. Continue to turn it up even louder so that the colors in that image are brighter, that the sounds that you're hearing are more vibrant, that you can hear them more, that the emotion that you're feeling in your heart with that joy is expanding and growing and overflowing. So much so that you've turned the dial up to the point where you feel like almost like your heart will burst with how much joy and happiness you're experiencing, reconnecting with that memory. Bring your awareness to how that feels in your body. Breathe it in and enjoy the experience of feeling that joyful moment again. And now bring your awareness back to me. What we just did, if you really participated in that and you fully embraced that experience, was that we just changed your biochemistry. Like if we tested before and we tested after, your serotonin, your dopamine, your love chemicals all will have risen, and your whole body would actually be feeling better, more powerful, more joyful, experiencing life even better. And those memories that we have been given throughout our life are joy nuggets. You can pull them out anytime you want, and you can experience and re-plug into that feeling of joy. But what we've essentially done by you tapping back into joy is actually change your biochemistry for that period of time. And your brain is such a powerful tool to be able to change what is happening for you on a physical level. And if you utilize it and you tap into these things and you do the work of unpacking the emotional stuff, you can do that on a more consistent basis where your body starts to manifest the beautifulness that you're creating in your mind and in your heart. So that's me today. I hope you have loved this. I trust that you all got something out of it. If you want to work with me more, you totally can. I'm about to release my 6-month coaching package for that. But right now, in 14 days, on the 14th of November, I'm releasing Courage, which is 10 days of helping you get into the alignment of courage, the courage that is needed to actually face some of the hard things in our lives and start to look at them from a risky versus safe problem, where we look at the risky things and we actually start to unpack your meta programming. It takes courage to be able to do that work. And so that course is $22. I'll put the link in the comments, and it'll be available for you to join me for 10 days of diving deep into courage so that your lioness can come out and help you create the inner work that is required. So thank you again for joining me. I hope you've been loving the Empowered Women's Summit. I'm loving it. I'm loving all of the different information that the speakers are providing for us. It has been a fantastic experience for me, and I will catch you on the other side. I'll go through and I'll answer any of the questions that were here as well, but I know I've kept you for like well over an hour. You've done well. All right, bye for now, guys. Catch you next time.